Welcome to our Shepherd's Chapel Bible Study. It's so great that you could join us once again. To let everybody know that didn't know this already, we did not get last week's lecture on YouTube. Chapter 8, the beginning of it, from chapter 8 verses 1 through 23 is not on YouTube, and we will pick it up at verse 24 today. The reason I didn't redo it is because we're really still in the chapter, and we're going to be re-examining some of the things that have already been stated in the beginning of the chapter. And what are we really talking about? We're talking about wisdom's reward in this chapter. Really, we're talking about where it says in verse 10, it says, "Receive my instruction and not silver, and knowledge rather than choice gold. For wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it." So we're really talking about today about godly wisdom and godly knowledge. Can we have knowledge of other things, like knowledge of the world? Of course we can. But the thing is, what's the difference? What would you say the difference between worldly knowledge and godly knowledge would be?
Eternity.
Eternity. Okay. Yeah. Anything?
One lasts forever. The other one doesn't.
So godly knowledge lasts forever, worldly knowledge doesn't. But can you succeed in worldly knowledge and not succeed in godly knowledge?
Yes. Yeah.
Depends on your definition of succeed.
Yeah.
Also depends on your definition of knowledge.
Yeah.
I want to give you the actual definitions and the words of wisdom and knowledge today before we begin. The word wisdom is chokmah. Chokmah. It's C-H-O-K-M-A-H, written in English. And it was very interesting when I did a little research on this. The number one definition of this wisdom is skill in war. That kind of blew me away. Very first definition, skill in war. But it's got several definitions. Wisdom in administration. Again, we're talking godly wisdom here. But when it said skill in war, why would it head off with that?
Who's your enemy?
That wisdom. That's right. Who's your enemy?
Yeah.
Who are you battling every day? Because we are in war. Every day of our lives we're in a war.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about Afghanistan. I'm not talking about Iraq. I'm talking about a spiritual warfare, good against evil. And I'm not talking about in the highways and byways necessarily. I'm talking about right in here.
Yeah.
Because we got to battle it every day. Why? Because every day, what are we in? We're in the flesh. And we're trying to rise above that flesh nature. But also a definition is shrewdness and prudence in religious affairs, and wisdom meaning ethical and religious. So that's the definition of wisdom. Now we also covered of knowledge. The word knowledge is Musar. M-U-W-C-A-R, written in English. And the description of knowledge would be discipline, chastening, correction. Discipline, correction, and chastening, which I thought was very... Now again, we're talking godly knowledge, not worldly. Godly knowledge. So if you have godly knowledge, if you obtain it, you're disciplined. If you have godly knowledge, you've been chastised and you have accepted it. That's the big one. You have accepted the chastening. And meaning also correction. You have been corrected by your Father, and now you're doing what's right. Hence, you have godly knowledge. You're doing what you should be doing the way you should be doing it. Not the way you want to do it, but the way you should be doing it. The way Christ would do it if he was here. See, because are we not the ambassadors? So, with that being said, I think I missed something here. With that being said, I want to continue in our studies in Proverbs chapter 8, picking it up in verse 24 with wisdom from our Heavenly Father. Again, who are we talking about here? The subject is still the same. Wisdom. So, verse 24 says, when there were no depths, I, being wisdom, was brought forth. Telling us what? From the very beginning with God, what did God create before He created anything? What was the very first thing God ever created?
Wisdom.
Wisdom. And as we covered last week, knowledge came right after it.
Mm-hmm.
And what came right at the same time? Understanding of it all.
Mm-hmm.
So God knew that He was so powerful, and it's kind of hard for our pea brains to wrap around this, but this is before the universe was created. This is before anything. God created wisdom to create. He created the knowledge and the understanding to create. So He created this. For me, it's kind of hard to understand how that developed. But in the beginning, He created this. He created a perfect way of doing things.
Mm-hmm.
So, when there were no fountains abounding with water, in other words, before He created the earth. 25, before the mountains were settled, before the hills was I brought forth, meaning wisdom. Wisdom was brought forth in the very beginning. Now, why do you think our Father is finding it necessary to tell us when wisdom came forth? Well, it's easy for us to look to our Father and say, well, we need to believe in Him, we need to trust in Him because He's all-knowing and He's all-seeing and He's all-doing. But He wants you to understand this is how you need to look at godly wisdom. Now, where is godly wisdom found? Only one place. Where is it?
With God.
Through God, being His Word.
Yeah, the Holy Spirit.
See, that is where you get godly knowledge and wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Now, of course, we have to do what?
Ask for it.
That's right. We have to ask for it. Now, just by asking, will you receive?
I would hope.
You say no, you say I hope. Well, the thing is, ask and ye shall receive. But how do you receive it?
By studying.
By studying it. In other words, is God going to miraculously, although He could, but will He? Have you ever heard of it where He just miraculously gave somebody all the knowledge that they needed?
Well, the author of this book is a good example. I don't know. I'm sure Solomon did study. But that was the first thing he asked for.
That's what comes to mind. What did Solomon do? He asked for the wisdom to do what? To lead the people in godly ways.
Mm-hmm.
See? So God granted him that favor. But like you said, we don't know how he accomplished from A to Z,
Mm-hmm.
as far as knowledge comes.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't. Yes, God can just zap you and fill your head with all the knowledge of the universe, but I think our head would explode. I don't think we could hold this other than in a spiritual body.
You can always ask in prayer before you go to make your decision.
We should always ask in prayer before you make a decision.
That's one way godly wisdom can be granted.
Mm-hmm. But do you not make a plan? Or better said, should you not make a plan before you do something? Thinking process of all right, well, I want to do this, but to achieve that, I need to do this, that, and the other. Now, praying to your Father before you do that will give you, if it's God's will, a plan of action.
Mm-hmm.
Or a plan of nothing.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, He doesn't want you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But where our flesh comes before our spirit, we go out and do it anyways. And what happens 9 times out of 10?
Mm-hmm.
What happens 100 out of 100 when it's not God's will? You fail.
Mm-hmm.
But if you go and do something that your Father wants you to do, and you pray about it, you will succeed. Not 80% of the time, 100% of the time. So the reason our Father is sticking with bringing forth this wisdom to us, He wants you to understand when you're using and utilizing godly wisdom correctly, you're going to succeed every single time. You're not going to fail. Well, are you telling me that whenever I failed, I wasn't using godly wisdom? Not necessarily. I'm telling you, every time you failed, one of two things happened. Either one, yes, you weren't using godly wisdom, or number two, you were going against God to begin with. It was something that He didn't want you to do. So He loves you so much, you're not going to win. You're going to fail. So who should you get mad at? You should get mad at yourself.
But at the end, you're really winning.
Huh?
In the end, you're really winning.
You are winning. You are winning. If you look at it through godly eyes, through godly wisdom, and the knowledge of all that, which brings forth, to have that knowledge, you have to understand what it all means. Now, why am I failing? Well, understand why you're failing. There's a reason behind it. You know, it's either you shouldn't have been doing it in the first place, or it's not the thing that our Father wants you to do. Before, verse 25 says, I did 26. While as yet He, being our Father, while as yet He had not made the earth, this is before the earth was ever even formed, nor the fields, nor the highest part of the dust of the world. In other words, wisdom came before everything. So God, in His infinite wisdom, realized He must create wisdom before He ever got started. Now, what does that tell you?
It tells me He had, like any good builder, you have to start with a good foundation and a blueprint and apply that. Everything was done from the beginning through wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't haphazard. It wasn't, we'll just try and figure it out. He knew from the beginning that this had to be done in a wise manner, or it wouldn't succeed.
Okay, let's take that now and bring it to us.
Yeah.
Why is He showing us this now?
Mm-hmm.
Because this is how He wants you to do things. He wants you to do things utilizing godly wisdom, not the wisdom of the world. I mean, you can see the wisdom of the world today just by the way, what you were talking about, June, just a few moments ago, how the world is behaving. And we can all agree with that. How they're behaving, they're like a bunch of sheep. And I'm not talking about the lambs of God. I'm talking about they're following each. You put out a thing out there, and like the internet, and people just jump all over it, and they'll agree with you, not knowing where the source came from, and they'll just jump on that bandwagon. Well, guess what? They're going to be doing the same exact thing when the Antichrist gets here. The whole world will be whoring after him, as the Scripture says. The whole world. Now, does that mean those that have godly wisdom and knowledge and understanding are going to be following? You're not of the world. You're not supposed to be of the world. You're living in it, but you're not of the world. And our Father is telling you, by giving you godly knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, yes, you're going to be here, but you're not going to be following that group. And that group is the majority, mass majority. That's why we're running into what we're running into today.
I think we'll be tested, though.
Of course we're tested. Why? To strengthen you, so that when the time comes, you're going to stand, and pardon the pun, the recent dramatic events, we're going to stand the ground.
I think that the reason poverty is taking over the earth, and I think it is to a big degree, is because that's where everybody will be, and that's why they will be so eager to jump on that bandwagon.
I agree and I disagree with you.
Okay.
I agree with what you said, but as far as the poverty, as long as they follow what is said in verse 11, for wisdom is better than rubies, and all the things that may be desired are not to be compared to it.
Right.
And the fact is, when you have your Father's godly knowledge, wisdom, and understanding, it doesn't matter how much money you got in the bank. It doesn't matter if you're living in a tent or the Taj Mahal. You are going to be filthy rich in God. And this world, you may be in poverty, considered part in the world. But the thing is, you're not impoverished.
Right.
Because God is supplying your every need. I didn't say your every want, but your every need. And when you come to that understanding, you're filthy rich.
But isn't June saying that that's why a lot of people are going to start to follow David Christ?
Right.
Yes, they are.
And wanting.
Because he'll be promising them all the things that they need. Pay their bills, stick it on every pot.
Up until he gets them in their back pocket, and then they're going to find out they ain't going to be any better off than what. As a matter of fact, they're going to be worse off. Yes.
Well, it does have two applications there. I was kind of asking the same thing before I came in. Basically, why? I mean, I'm not perfect by any means, and I've never, I'm still struggling a lot, but why have I not never, gone without what I needed? Why? What makes me, better? I kind of had to.
You already know the answer to that. Without tooting our own horn.
Well, I was in another conversation at that point. What can I do, sort of thing. But I was in that thought process, and that kind of ties in there. That it does within what you say. At that point, that a lot of them will be poor because of not having godly wisdom and not searching for God, not asking God.
Yeah,
Because
I was talking about
physical poorness.
Yeah.
But what did Christ say when he was still here as Son of Man? You will always have the poor with you.
Mm-hmm.
Always. But was he talking about physically poor or spiritually poor? He's talking about both.
That's what I was going to say, probably both.
Both. And yes, June, what you're saying, the reason Satan will be so easily followed is because people want what they don't have.
And you'll be offering it.
And if you have, and you know that you have everything that you need, you don't need him or anyone else. You need your Father.
That's where I was tying that in with.
Yeah.
They will be physically poor because they won't be searching out for God, and they'll be looking.
Well, let me tell you something. This government is going to make everybody physically poor.
Well,
I don't care who you are.
There's people physically poor right now that can't afford clothes and shoes, but they've got what they need. They got food.
Well, I'm physically poor. You're about to see a lot more physically poor than you've ever seen in your lifetime.
I think what's the one world system comes in, I think it's going to be.
Yeah. Remember, it almost comes to a completion before it breaks apart. But let's continue. Verse 27. When he prepared the heavens, I was there. When he set a compass upon the face of the depth, I could inlay here, I was there, meaning wisdom was there before God did all of this. 28. When he established the clouds above, when he strengthened the fountains of the deep. Now what is he telling us here? He used wisdom, godly wisdom, to do all these things. I mean, mankind, we got modern science today. Modern science today can't even figure out how the brain works. Oh, they've learned a lot, but they haven't been able to create a human brain, have they? You think they've tried? Of course they've tried. But the thing is, they can't create something that God created. Why? Because they're not God, number one. And number two, they definitely don't have godly wisdom. 29, when he gave to the sea his decree, that the water should not pass his commandment. people today are talking about global warming and the ice sheets melting and all this, and the water table of the seas raising. But guess what? They're still not going to raise above where God says you're not going past. I don't care how much melting you get. And besides, you have global warming. If you have godly wisdom, you realize the reason we have global warming is because it happens every so many thousands of years by the rotation of the earth to the sun. It's very simple. But people don't want to look at that. No, the whole universe is moving in a certain thing. And the earth tilts and rotates. And when it gets to a certain point, it goes back to the other way. I'm not talking about the great shaking now. I'm just talking about natural course of events. And so many thousands of years, the earth rotates to the nearest part of the sun. Well, guess what? What does that tell you? You get closer to the sun, what happens? It heats up. Now let me ask you another, and here's a proof of this. I know I'm going beyond this, but here's proof of this. You ever watch the news and they give you the weather report, and they give you the hottest day of the year in past history and the coldest night of the year in past history? Well, why is, like recently, it was in 1917, it was hotter than it is today. Why? If we have global warming, why was it hotter in 1917? Because the Earth's rotation, see. But people don't want to look at that. They want to jump on the bandwagon like sheep and say, well, we're having global warming and all this is because we're spraying our armpits with too many aerosols. Or whatever the case may be. There's all kinds of... Is there more pollution today? They found out there was more pollution when this planet was formed with the volcanoes than there is today. More pollution then than there is today.
We're not using nothing from outer space. We're using everything that's created on this earth. So.
Well, point being, verse 29 concludes, when he appointed the foundations of the earth. He's talking about he had this godly wisdom, godly knowledge, and godly understanding. And the reason he's bringing this to you, he wants you to realize, look, you need this, because this came from the beginning. This came from me. And this is very important to understand because he used it to form everything. So if God created it and he used it to form everything, shouldn't we use it to form everything in our lives? That's where he's going with all this. 30. Then I was by him as one brought up with him, and I was daily his delight, rejoicing always before him. Why was wisdom rejoicing? Because every time wisdom is used, it is profitable. It is right. It is righteousness. It is a good thing. There's no negative when you're utilizing and using godly wisdom. 31. Rejoicing in the habitable part of, hear this, his earth. It's not your earth. You may own a piece of paper saying you own a plot of land. It ain't your land. Somebody came to you and says, I'll sell you this land. But what they're doing, they're ripping you off because it's not their land either. It's God's land. Well, you mean I can go over here in this plot of land and sit down on there and say it's mine? Not anymore. You used to be able to get away with that. Not anymore. Because somewhere, someone's going to come along and say, I own it. And you owe me by sitting on there. Let's not get into the squatters and all that. I mean, that's very rare anymore these days. But your Father is saying, look, this is his earth. And by knowing that and understanding it, we realize we're only renters. I don't care what kind of piece of paper you got, you're only renting your plot. Now there will come a day that he has given you a portion, and it will be yours for all eternity. That's when we can look at having our land, but it still belongs to him. We'll always have a landlord. And my delights were with the sons of men. Sons of men meaning all the souls that he's created. Now, verse 32. Therefore, hearken unto me, O ye children, for blessed are they that keep my ways. You want to be blessed in your life, then you do what? You keep His ways. What does that mean? You utilize godly wisdom, godly knowledge, and godly understanding. And you do what He says to do in His Word. You can read it, you can prophesy over it, you can think about it, but until you utilize it and do it, it's not going to do you a bit of good. It's not going to do you a bit of good. Because you're not doing anything with the knowledge that you've been given. There's plenty of people in this world that have what's called book sense, but they don't have what's called common sense. And common sense, really, if you really think about it, is godly wisdom. Because it's common to all that love your Father. 33. And this is what you got to do to start it off, the whole thing. Hear instruction. You've got to hear it first. Hear instruction. And then what? And be wise. And, here it is, refuse it not. You can either accept this or you can reject it. It's up to you. But it's your choice. You can refuse all this. You can refuse godly wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. You say, well, who in the world would do that? There's plenty of people who do it every day. There's plenty of Christians that do it every day. I mean, people who believe in the rapture, people who believe and trust in the rapture, have they trusted in godly wisdom or refused it? When the wisdom of God says there's no rapture. Where God says He hates it. He hates those who teach His children to fly to save their soul. Ezekiel 13:20. He hates it. So utilizing godly wisdom tells you, well, I'm not going to believe in this stuff, the rapture. But you got plenty of people who do. So are they using godly knowledge, wisdom, and understanding? They can't be. Because it goes against your Father's Word. He's not going to give you one thing in His Word and tell you to believe something else over here. But those that are following like a bunch of sheep, because Yahoo's done it before. I don't mean Yahoo, the internet thing. I'm talking about Joe Blow out there. Because they're doing it, they're going to do it. My daddy did, my pappy did, my papa. My papa's papa. You know. No, you don't do it because of that. You do things because of what your Father wants you to do or not to do. That's utilizing godly knowledge, wisdom, and the understanding of it. Because remember, these three words are simultaneous. Godly knowledge, godly wisdom, and the godly understanding. You can't have wisdom without the understanding of things. And you can't have understanding of things without the knowledge of things. Verse 4 says, blessed is the man that heareth me, watching daily at my gates, waiting. What are you watching for?
Knowledge, wisdom, paying attention, being quiet, and taking instruction.
Yeah, you're also watching for opportunities. Watching daily at my gates, waiting at the post of my doors, waiting for His call to act. This watching daily at my gates is really the gates of wisdom's house. The church, what we would call the church of Christ. Christ Church, which is the many-membered body, which are the public ordinances thereof. His truth and understanding of it. Called in Scripture it's called the gates of Zion in Psalms 87 verse 2. The gates of Zion. And waiting there, what are you waiting for? You're waiting for admission into what? God's house. You know, this was intriguing today because there's times I've been here at 11 o'clock and no one's been here because of whatever reason. And today, I was waiting for nobody to be here at 11, or maybe Shane to be here a couple minutes prior, and then everybody show up. But today, everybody was early. And it kind of talks about this in this verse where you're hungry to receive the Word. Now, you can receive it anywhere, but we have chosen to gather together to receive and study that Word. Now, it's just like preparing. I was thinking about Shane during this. When I called up Shane here a couple of weeks ago or whatever, and I said, what are you doing? He says, I'm preparing. I said, for what? He says, for my camping trip. It was the day before. He was preparing, getting his stuff ready and the camping things ready and making sure he had all the necessary tools to help him when he's camping so he doesn't do without certain things. And what came to mind when I was thinking about that, how do we prepare to study? What do we do other than just show up? See? And I thought about this, and it's true. And including myself on the day of the lecture, is the only thing I do, hopefully you do the same thing, is pray. I pray that I will be able to receive, that I will be able to understand, and then I pray that I will be able to be used as His tool to give the truth to whoever wants to hear it. But during the week I also prepare. I prepare to research and understand and godly knowledge and wisdom and look here and look there and cross-reference and do all these things to bring forth a level of understanding that we can all hear and understand of godly knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. But my question is how do you guys prepare yourselves on a day-to-day basis dealing with, if you want to use godly wisdom and understanding, do you prepare yourself for it? And that's what this verse is talking about. To be ready early at the gate, early in the morning, throughout the day, throughout the time that you're dealing with the world. You've got to we know we got to put the world past us. We got to live in it, we got to work in it, but we're not to be a part of it. So the only way that can happen is if you start your day with Him, and throughout the day you're with Him, and you end the day with Him. Well, how can we do that other than walking around like this all the time? We keep Him forefront in our minds in everything that we do. That we're constantly thinking about Christ things, godly things, the proper way of doing things. And it's hard to do when we get ticked off, because we want to fly off the handle. We want to fly off the handle. We want to be negative. We want to fight fire with fire, and we want to throw it back at them more than they gave us. But that's not what Christ does. No, Christ deals with certain things His way, the proper way. And the only way for us to understand that is if we do things His way. So we need to focus on Him, focus on His Word, and study it, not just on Saturday, but every day of our lives. We need to feed our bodies, we need to feed our souls every day of our lives, not just dust it off on Saturday or when we meet. Here's a question for you. You don't need to answer this. When we don't meet, when there's been those 2 weeks, almost going on 3 weeks before we meet, how often did you open that Word and study it? Don't answer, because God already knows the answer. And the point is that He wants to get through to us. We need to do and be with Him every single day of our lives. It's important. And we don't do it because we're scared. We do it because we want to. We want to be there early. We want to be at the gates. We want to be at the doors every day. Every day. It says daily. Not just on Saturday. 35, for whoso findeth me, findeth life, and shall obtain favor of the Lord. You want favor of the Lord? Then you do things His way. Daily. 36, to complete the chapter, but he that sinneth against me wrongeth his own soul. All they that hate me love death. And that's wisdom. Now wisdom continues. Even though it's in a different chapter, it's the same thought here. Wisdom, chapter 9. Wisdom hath builded her house. She hath hewn out her 7 pillars, meaning wisdom has brought forth completeness. When you are using godly wisdom, you are complete with God. When you are doing this daily, you are complete with Him. And you build your, as you were talking about, Ross, a house, you are building your house on Him, not on the sand of the world. Verse 2 says, she hath killed her beasts. Now this is kind of unusual. Not really, though, if you understand it. She hath mingled her wine. She hath also furnished her table, meaning the table that was furnished by whose table? Christ's table. Some of us know and remember the Last Supper, as it's called. The beast were the beasts is talking about here that were slain before Christ, because mankind used to have to go out and slay animals and bring them to the temple and slay all these beasts. But utilizing godly knowledge and wisdom and the understanding of all this, who became all that? Christ became all that. So, what did Christ also become? The mingling of this wine. The wine represents basically a banquet feast at the house of the Lord. Well, what is that wine? Knowing of what we would call the Last Supper and the Holy Communion, what does the wine represent? Anyone? The wine, what does that wine when we drink, Blood of who? The beast or of Christ? The blood of Christ. So is to be honored. The gospel of Christ is also compared to wine. It's compared to that here in the Song of Solomon. I'm going to read one verse. Song of Solomon, chapter 7, verse 9 says, and the roof of thy mouth like the best wine from my beloved, that goeth down sweetly, causing the lips of those that are asleep to speak. You see, the beast, the blood, the wine, all represent Christ. And by participating of that, you are participating with Christ. So, it concludes in verse 2, she hath also furnished her table. When you participate in the blood of Christ, when you participate in the wine of Christ, when you participate in the beast, which is His blood that He sacrificed, He is that lamb that was sacrificed with us. When we participate in that, utilizing godly knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of all that, then we are participating of Christ. And that's what this is in reference to in verse 2. She hath, in verse 3, sent forth her maidens, that's her servants, to invite guests to Christ's table. She hath sent forth her maidens. She crieth upon the highest places of the city. Again, what are we talking about? We're talking about godly wisdom. When you're utilizing godly wisdom, you are understanding how all these things take place and what they mean and what they represent. Whoso is simple, verse 4, this word simple is pethe, meaning simple or foolish, but it also means open-minded. Keep that in mind, open-minded. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. Turn in hither to what? Wisdom. In other words, if you're open-minded, you should turn to godly wisdom. As for him that wanteth understanding, that's what we're talking about earlier. You ask and you shall receive. You turn unto wisdom as one that wants understanding. She saith to him, verse 5, wisdom says to him, come, eat of my bread, which is what? The word, the truth. Eat of my bread and drink of the wine, that everlasting spiritual wine, which I have mingled. Now this word mingled is mesak, and it means to pour out to you. Now we participate of what's called Holy Communion. You know, the thing is, you can have that Holy Communion daily in His Word, and the spiritual, having godly wisdom, godly knowledge, and the understanding of it. You can have that every day of your life. You don't have to have a physical cup of wine and a physical unleavened bread. You can have that Holy Communion with your Father every day when you utilize godly knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. Because this right here is your bread. This right here is your wine. This right here is your wisdom. This right here is your understanding of it. A lot of people will open this book and they say, I can't understand it. Why? Because they didn't go to the author and the finisher who wrote it. They're not utilizing this as holy scriptures. They're utilizing this and reading it like it's a novel. Well, you're not going to get anything out of it that way. Oh, you'll get the what I call the first row. You know, in other words, you'll realize that you need Christ Jesus in your life. But there's so much more to this book than just that. Not to take just that away from God at all. Verse 6, forsake the foolish and live, and go in the way of understanding. Do what? Forsake the foolish. What does that mean? Stop listening to the sheep. Stop following all those out here in the world that everybody's got two things. They've got one of these in their back ends, and they've got an opinion. Everyone you've talked to. Have you ever started speaking to someone about, well, let's say you sprain your wrist, let's just say. Well, you know, they look at, oh, what happened to you? Well, I sprained my wrist, and oh, how did it happen? And you tell them, and then what do they say? They tell you what happened to them. It could have been 20 years ago, but they had the same thing, or maybe, usually, even worse. Why? Because everybody has an opinion about what happens to you. In everything. Guess what? It's the same in Christianity. Everybody has an opinion of how you should worship, how you should pray, how you should look at things. Now here, listen to this, and this is important. 7. He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame, and he that rebuketh a wicked man getteth himself a blot. Now what does that mean? He that reproveth a scorner getteth to himself shame. What's a scorner? A scorner is one who could care less about God. He mocks God. And basically what our Father is saying, look, you're casting your pearls before swine. Don't deal with it. That's my department. You're dealing with a scorner out there, one who could care less. You say, well, wait a minute, now we're to plant seeds. He didn't tell you not to plant a seed. He's saying reproveth. In other words, you're jumping on a bandwagon here, and you got to make him believe. You got to make him understand. Because, after all, you want to see him live forever. Well, so does your Father. But your Father doesn't want you to spend so much time on this person that this person over here really wants to hear, because they're asking questions. That's the ones you need to look for. People who really want to hear it. Not ones that everything you say is scorning, scoffing it off. Or
it makes you an example in front of a crowd that you don't want to be. You get into
confrontation and let something that's not very godly come out of you, anger towards this person.
Yeah, because you will get heated if you no longer use godly. And by utilizing godly wisdom, knowledge, and understanding, you're not going to get in that shape. Another verse that's very important for, and I want Donna to hear this and everyone to hear this. Reprove not a scorner, lest he hate thee. Rebuke a wise man, and he will love thee. Notice you got reprove and rebuke. Reprove not a scorner. In other words, that scoffer, don't worry about them. Let them behave how they're going to behave. But it says now, rebuke a wise man. In other words, you got someone that has knowledge, that has understanding, and they're doing something wrong. And you come to them and say, look, what you're doing is wrong. If that person is wise and not a scoffer, they will accept that and say, you know, you're right. I shouldn't be doing it. And they'll love you for it. But a person who is not this will scoff at you and turn from you and backbite you and do all these negative things towards you. Because after all, they weren't wise to begin with. They just played the part. They just played the part. Well, I wanted to go a little farther, but I guess we'll end here today. To God be the glory.